Welcome everyone to another episode of The Asylum with Harley and Joker. We are back.
What up? What up,
I have
everybody?
the Joker with me tonight, like always.
That's right, folks. Joker's had himself some tacos and some pie, and he's hoping to get into more of both those things later tonight. So let's get this fucker forth.
Okay, so tonight's episode is we're going to take a little glimpse into some famous serial killers' homes. And this is going to be quite interesting because it might change your mindset on them, but I don't think it will. So let's go to the screen.
Harold Shipman, who stashed up a large chunk of morphine and diamorphine in a plastic bag. These discoveries reveal the twisted minds and shadowy lives of these serial killers, painting a terrifying picture of their evil deeds. Let's begin with Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer, one of the most infamous serial killers in American history, shocked the world not only with his heinous crimes, but also with the gruesome discoveries made in his apartment at the time of his arrest in 1991. When Milwaukee police entered Dahmer's apartment, they were unprepared for the nightmarish scene that awaited them. The first indication of the horrors within Dahmer's apartment came when police noticed a foul odor emanating from the unit. Upon entering, they discovered a refrigerator containing human remains, including severed heads and other body parts. In addition to the human remains, investigators found photographs documenting Dahmer's grisly acts. These images showed victims in various stages of dismemberment, providing a horrifying visual record of his crimes. Perhaps the most shocking discovery was the large blue barrel found in Dahmer's bedroom. The barrel contained the decomposing remains of 3 victims who had been dismembered and dissolved in acid. Further investigation revealed Dahmer's attempts to create a zombie of sorts, a living person who would be under his complete control. He admitted to drilling holes into the skulls of some of his victims and injecting acid or boiling water into their brains in a futile effort to achieve this twisted fantasy. The total remains of 17 different victims.
He's a Dr. Frankenstein.
Apartment, each discovery more gruesome.
I didn't know the whole he was trying to make a zombie part.
Leave you shocked.
Lines up for day, Dahmer.
In December 19...
Okay, we'll stop and talk about that about Jeffrey Dahmer first. So, Jeremy, what would you have done if you lived next door and started smelling that horrific smell of decomposing bodies?
Well, my theory has always been you don't fuck with your neighbors, they don't fuck with you. So, and if you smell that, I mean, do you really want to fuck with someone who's doing that shit? Like, you're gonna end up in one of those barrels if you fuck with them.
No, I'm good. I don't think I want to. Well, I would have been fine because I was the wrong gender anyways in that situation. You, on the other hand, you would have been so fine.
For Dahmer?
Yeah.
Dahmer? Oh, yeah, wait a minute. Yeah.
It was all guys.
I'm thinking, oh, yeah, I always get him and Bundy confused for hot seconds.
Yeah, you wouldn't have been fine, but I would have because, well,
I mean,
have the right parts and...
I mean, I'm a bear. Guys like that love me regardless, so, you know, it is what it is, but...
Okay, let's go to our next one.
Pogo the mean molester.
In 1967, Gacy pleaded guilty to oral sodomy. His wife divorced him, and he was sentenced to prison. After serving less than 2 years, Gacy was released and sought to rebuild his life. He married his second wife and moved into a new home at 8213 West Summerdale Avenue in Norwood Park, Chicago. Between 1972 and 1976, Gacy lured at least 33 young men and boys to his home under the guise of offering them part-time work. Once inside, he subjected them to unimaginable torture and ultimately murder. In December 1978, the police investigation into John Wayne Gacy took a decisive turn. Several teenage boys had come forward, accusing Gacy of sexual assault. These reports prompted the authorities to obtain a search warrant for his home at 8213 West Summerdale Avenue. What the police found inside was beyond anyone's worst nightmares. As they began to search the property, they discovered a crawl space beneath the house. The air was thick with a foul odor, and it wasn't long before they uncovered the first of many bodies. In total, 26 bodies were found buried in the crawl space. 3 more were discovered on the adjoining property, and a handful of others were found in the nearby Des Plaines River, where Gacy had disposed of them. The sheer number of victims shocked the nation and left the community in a state of disbelief and horror. John Wayne Gacy was arrested and quickly confessed to the murders. He claimed to have killed 33 young men and boys between 1972 and 1976. Despite his attempts to plead insanity, Gacy was found guilty of all charges and sentenced to death in 1980. Unlike Gacy, who confessed to his crime, the investigation for the next lady on the
Okay, so my question on that whole Gacy thing. Okay, so he divorced him and his first wife divorced because he went to jail for oral sodomy. Okay.
They don't go into detail though. They don't go into detail.
They don't go into detail about that. Okay, so he gets out and he remarries his second wife, and they're living in this house. I have two questions on that. How does she not notice all the boys going in and out of the house, and how does she not notice the foul odor coming from the house, the crawl space? Because you know that house had to smell just horrific.
Ignorance. Ignorance is bliss, Harley. Ignorance is bliss.
I mean, if you were in that situation, wouldn't you notice like the weird things going on around you?
And she probably didn't care. She probably had an African American boyfriend a couple streets over named Jerome.
The list remains inconclusive till this date. Belle Gunness. Belle Gunness, a seemingly innocent widow in LaPorte, Indiana, hid a horrifying secret. In May 1908, a fire at her farm revealed a gruesome truth. She was one of America's most notorious serial killers. The discovery of buried bodies and a headless corpse shocked the nation. Belle's hired hand, Ray Lamphere, was infatuated with her and helped dispose of bodies. When Ray became a threat due to his obsession, Belle framed him for her crimes. Days before the fire, Belle made a will, expressing fear for her life. After the blaze, authorities found a headless body they believed was Belle's, though her true fate remains uncertain. A later investigation revealed the remains of numerous victims on her property. In 2008, an attempt to use DNA to confirm Belle's identity was inconclusive, leaving the mystery of whether she died in the fire or escaped to continue her crimes unresolved. Belle committed her deadly crime on her farm, but the next on the list performed his acts in a place.
So, do you think she died in that fire, or do you think that she used that fire as a cover-up to get away and then died somewhere else later in life?
I've looked into her before, and it's unknown. It's too far back to the point where they really can't trace shit. Like, it's too far back. They can't even like recreate shit. Like, it's just in that day and age, you can get away with shit like that. And just move over like a state over and get away with shit.
And nobody would be none the wiser.
Nope.
It's called the Murder Castle. H.H. Holmes. In the bustling city of Chicago, amidst the excitement of the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition, a seemingly ordinary building stood at the corner of 63rd and Wallace Streets. This Murder Castle, three-story structure that would become infamous for the horrors, concealed within its walls. Commissioned by H.H. Holmes, the building was designed to serve as a hotel for exposition visitors, but its true purpose was far more sinister. Holmes's victims, often young women lured by promises of employment or lodging, would find themselves trapped in this labyrinth. Once inside, they were at the mercy of
American
Holmes's
Horror Story do like a show
Some
on
rooms were
that
equipped
hotel?
with gas pipes, allowing Holmes to asphyxiate his victims at will. These airtight chambers were soundproof, ensuring that no cries for help could be heard. Holmes had also installed chutes that led directly to the basement.
Because I
After
swear that
murdering his
hotel one
victims,
was
he would
about that
dispose of their
hotel.
bodies by sending them down these chutes. The basement itself was a house of horrors, filled with surgical instruments, vats of acid, and quicklime pits. Holmes used these tools to dissect and destroy the remains, leaving no trace of his gruesome deeds. One of the most horrifying discoveries in the basement was a large furnace, which Holmes used to incinerate the bodies. This furnace was capable of reaching extremely high temperatures, reducing human remains to ashes. Holmes's meticulous planning ensured that his crimes would remain hidden, as the evidence was literally burned away. When authorities finally searched the murder castle after Holmes's arrest, they were shocked by what they found. The hidden rooms, the gas chambers, the chutes, and the basement filled with torture devices painted a gruesome picture of Holmes's activities. It was clear that this building had been designed with one purpose in mind: to facilitate murder on an industrial scale. The police report detailed the horrifying discoveries, noting the presence of human remains and the various methods Holmes had used to kill and dispose of his victims. This next serial killer...
No, American Horror Story based part of that season around Holmes, but they used a lot of different serial killers in that season to put together the story.
No, I mean like the hotel itself was.
No, the hotel they did was like in fucking, I think, wasn't it in Vegas or some shit? Or was it in California?
But I mean, I don't know exactly where it was, but I mean like the concept of it, because there was all those hidden rooms and all that for the Horror Story hotel.
They based it on Holmes' murder mansion. They based it on the Winchester house too. They like always, American Horror Story never does a season directly on one thing. They always combine a bunch of different crap in together.
was probably obsessed with his mother, and all of his crimes were related to creating an image of a person who looked like his late mother. Ed Gein. Ed Gein, an unassuming man from Plainfield, Wisconsin, concealed a macabre reality beneath his quiet exterior. When authorities entered his home in 1957 and found human organs preserved in jars and masks fashioned from human skin, the investigation into Ed Gein's horrific crimes began on November 16, 1957, when Bernice Warden, the owner of a local hardware store in Plainfield, Wisconsin, went missing. Her son, Frank Warden, a deputy sheriff, was immediately alarmed when he found the store in disarray. The cash register was missing, and a trail of blood led out the back door. Frank's suspicions quickly turned to Ed Gein, a reclusive handyman known for his odd behavior. Authorities wasted no time in apprehending Ed Gein at a neighbor's house. The house was in a state of squalor, with filth and clutter everywhere. In the kitchen, they found the headless, gutted body of Bernice Warden hanging from the ceiling like a grotesque hunting trophy. Her head was discovered in a burlap sack, and her heart was hanging in a plastic bag. As investigators continued to search the house, they uncovered a macabre collection of human remains, organs preserved in jars, skulls repurposed as soup bowls, and a belt crafted from human nipples were just a few of the horrifying artifacts. Among the most shocking discoveries were masks made from human skin, which Gein would wear around the house, and a suit made entirely of human skin,
love me some good nipples.
Reportedly donned to become his mother. Under questioning, Ed Gein confessed to the murders of Bernice Warden and Mary Hogan, a tavern owner who had disappeared in December 1954. He admitted to shooting both women, who bore a striking resemblance to his late mother, but the horrors didn't end there. Gein also confessed to exhuming numerous corpses from local graveyards, using their body parts to create his grotesque collection of items. He would carefully select corpses that resembled his mother and bring them back to his farmhouse, where he would dissect and mutilate them. In March 1958, the Gein farmhouse mysteriously burned down amid rumors that it might be turned into a museum. The next serial killer was once named the Measuring Man.
Hey, Measuring Man, I got something for you to measure.
Wow. Of course, I knew you were going to say something like that. No, so, of course, you want the belt of nipples, and then the bowl, that's the skull.
Hey, that's the problem. That's the problem with society. Not enough people eat off the freaking skulls of their enemies anymore.
Exactly. I mean, I thought that's what you're supposed to do.
That's the way it should be.
A name he gave himself while he performed his heinous crimes. Albert DeSalvo.
So what was he measuring?
Albert DeSalvo, infamously known as the Boston Strangler, is linked to the brutal murders of 13 women in the Boston area between 1962 and 1964. DeSalvo, who initially posed as a model scout called the Measuring Man, would gain entry into women's homes under the pretense of recruiting them for a modeling agency. His criminal activities escalated, culminating in the strangling deaths of several women, mostly elderly and living alone. After being identified in a lineup, DeSalvo Desalvo
been good.
confessed to a series of crimes, including the Boston Strangler murders. While in custody at Bridgewater State Hospital, he provided his
I know
attorney,
where that is.
F. Lee Bailey, with detailed accounts of the murders. Despite his confession, doubts about his guilt persisted. In 2013, forensic analysis confirmed DeSalvo's DNA matched evidence from the last known victim, Mary Sullivan, effectively linking him to her murder. Massachusetts Attorney General Martha Coakley declared that the DNA evidence left no doubt about DeSalvo's responsibility for Sullivan's death and his likely role as the Boston Strangler. However, questions remain about whether he acted alone or had accomplices. DeSalvo was murdered in prison in 1973 before he could provide further information. It was the brutal death of a ballet dancer that led the police to getting a search warrant for the next serial killer.
I mean, he's not Richard Ramirez, but he's a fucking legendary killer here in Massachusetts, and my wife's actually from near Bridgewater, so I know where Bridgewater is. But it's, I don't think a hospital is there anymore. I don't think it is, at least, but I'm pretty sure. But it's, yeah, I mean, you gotta respect the numbers that all these serial killers have done in short years. Like 2 years and you kill like 30 plus people. That's just tenacity. That's just going for it.
And to get away with like that long of time frame for some of them, and like no one suspect anything.
Well, that's because Harley, back then there was no cameras. There was, as long as you were smart about shit back then, you couldn't get caught. Like someone had to see you doing it back then to get caught, or just you had to be weird enough like a game where they immediately suspect you. Hey, look, it's Howard Stern.
On the list, Rodney Alcala. The investigation into Robin Samso's murder began on June 20th, 1979, when she disappeared while biking to a ballet class in Huntington Beach, California. Her body was found 12 days later in the Sierra Madre Mountains. The brutal nature of her death led detectives to Rodney Alcala, a man with a history of violent crimes. A search of Alcala's home and Seattle storage locker revealed over 100 photographs of women and children, many in suggestive poses. These meticulously composed images showed subjects in various states of undress, their expressions ranging from fear to confusion. Some were taken outdoors, others in what appeared to be Alcala's apartment. In March 2010, the Huntington Beach police released the photos to the public, hoping to identify the individuals and uncover more victims. Despite widespread media coverage, many remain unidentified, a haunting reminder of the potential extent of Alcala's crimes. The next serial killer brutally murdered 10 people, and in a quest to find evidence leading to their death, the investigators made a significant discovery in his home: Dennis Rader. Recent discoveries at Dennis Rader's former property have reignited interest in the notorious BTK killer. Rader, who terrorized Kansas from 1974 to 1991, brutally murdered 10 people. The latest search of his Park City, Kansas
You
property
go that long,
was
you only
linked
get
to the
10 people?
1976
That's weak.
disappearance of Cynthia Cindy Dawn Kinney, a
Yeah,
16-year-old cheerleader.
some of these
Rader
only
had long
did it
been a
in a
suspect
year
in her
and
case,
killed
and
40
investigators
people.
hoped to find evidence that could solve this cold case. During the search, a significant discovery was made: a pantyhose ligature, a tool Rader famously used to bind his victims. This chilling find, along with other items buried under a concrete slab, suggests Rader might have hidden trophies from his crimes. The evidence has been handed over to the Kansas Bureau of Investigation for further analysis. Rader's capture in 2005 was largely due to letters he sent to the media, taunting authorities with cryptic messages that ultimately led to his arrest. He confessed to 10 murders and is now serving 10 consecutive life sentences. The recent findings may shed light on more unsolved cases tied to his brutal legacy. Ever heard of the Son of Sam? He was
Okay, that's kind of like I'm not saying that all these other ones like what they did was right, because it's not. But they accomplished more in that little time frame than what he did in that time frame. Not that is any better, but
If you're gonna do something, folks, do it the fuck right.
don't take the lazy way. And
That's like a porn star being active for freaking 20 years, being like, I made 10 movies,
but I was active for 20 years.
and then you got the fucking, and then you go look at these famous female porn stars. I slept with 121 guys in a month.
Yeah.
Respect that shit. Those portholes.
was a serial killer who left a trail of fear and death in his wake. David Berkowitz. On August 10th, 1977, the arrest of David
Sam,
Berkowitz
son
marked
of
the end of a
man.
year-long
Son of
reign of
man.
terror that had gripped New York City. Known as the Son of Sam, Berkowitz had left a trail of fear and death in his wake, but the true horror was only just beginning to unfold. As investigators stepped
That's a
into
bad
his
thing.
modest
All these
apartment, they
guys
were
who were in
unprepared for the
prison
chilling discoveries
or
that
death
awaited
row
them. The first
was
thing
getting
that
all
struck
these love
investigators
letters
was the
from all
sheer
these hot
disarray of the
girls who were
apartment.
obsessed with
Papers were
serial
strewn
killers.
everywhere, and the walls were covered in bizarre scribblings and symbols. Among the chaos, they found a series of diaries that would provide a horrifying glimpse into Berkowitz's twisted psyche. Berkowitz's diaries were meticulously detailed, chronicling each of his attacks with chilling precision. He described the thrill he felt as he stalked his victims, the rush of adrenaline
That'd
as
be
he pulled the
something to
trigger,
see, like
and the
the
satisfaction of
diaries
watching the life
themselves.
drain from their eyes. These entries were filled with graphic details that left investigators and the public horrified. One entry read, "I am the son of Sam. I am a monster. I am the chubby
I don't think
behemoth.
they'd
I
leave
love
me
to hunt,
horrified.
prowling the streets looking for fair game, tasty meat. The women of Queens are the prettiest of all." Investigators also found a collection of letters that Berkowitz had written to the police and the media. These taunting messages were filled with cryptic symbols and references to satanic rituals. In one letter, he wrote, "I am deeply hurt by your calling me a woman hater. I am not, but I am a monster. I am the son of Sam. I am a little brat. When Father Sam gets drunk, he gets mean. He beats his family. Sometimes he ties me up to the back of the house. Other times he locks me in the garage. Sam loves to drink blood." Perhaps the most shocking discovery was the collection of occult items found in Berkowitz's home. Investigators found candles, pentagrams, and other symbols associated with satanic rituals. Among the items found in the apartment was a map of New York City with various locations marked. The discoveries made in David Berkowitz's home revealed the depths of his depravity and the twisted motivations behind his crimes. Let's take a look at the serial killer who turned his
Toucan Sam, son of man.
I mean, if you look back at like a lot of these serial killers, they had a pretty, like, not all of them, but some of them had a really pretty messed up childhood,
That's usually what makes you one.
and like it led them to be this way. I mean, like they just said that he said that his father drank and beat him and strangled him.
I mean, if you never done any research into it, yes, that's one of the key ingredients in the recipe to make a serial killer is be a horrible fucking parent to your kid and beat the shit out.
Like, I mean, if you watch like the Jeffrey Dahmer story, it basically says his father took him out to pick up the dead roadkill.
Well, I mean, Dahmer fucking just collected that shit as a kid anyway and fucking experimented on it. So, yeah.
Well, I know, but like it started out, his father took him out to bond by picking up roadkill. Why would you bond with your child by going and picking up roadkill?
I mean, if you're going to take it home and eat it, then maybe.
That's some stuff they do in the South, probably, but
Ain't nothing better than squash possum.
Joel Rifkin. As
Ooh,
investigators descended upon Joel Rifkin's home at 1492 Garden Street in East Meadow, New York, they were unprepared for the horrors that awaited them. The modest ranch-style house, which Rifkin shared with his mother and sister,
they always
appeared
look so
unremarkable
nice on
from
the
the outside.
outside, but
However,
then
the discoveries
they
made
find
within its
horrific
walls would
shit
reveal the
on
true
the
extent
inside.
of Rifkin's monstrous activities. The first shocking discovery was made in the garage, a space that had been transformed into a gruesome workshop of death. Among the clutter of everyday items, police found a blood-stained chainsaw. This tool, which Rifkin used to dismember his victims, was a chilling testament to the brutality of his crimes. As they continued their search, investigators uncovered more disturbing evidence in the basement. Here, they found several large plastic containers, each filled with human remains. These containers held the dismembered bodies of Rifkin's victims, some of whom had been missing for years. Hidden beneath his bed, police found a collection of personal items belonging to his victims, victims. These macabre trophies included jewelry, clothing, and even photographs. Rifkin had kept these items as mementos of his heinous acts, a chilling reminder of the lives he had taken. In addition to the physical evidence, investigators also found a detailed journal in Rifkin's home. This journal contained meticulous records of his murders,
Only
including the
17?
names of his victims, the dates of their deaths, and the methods he used to kill them. The journal provided a horrifying insight into Rifkin's psyche, revealing a man who took meticulous care in documenting his atrocities. Each entry was a chilling testament to his methodical approach to murder, a stark reminder of the evil that can lurk behind a seemingly ordinary facade. The next serial killer definitely
Ordinary
understands the
facade,
need
my
for proper
fucking
planning,
ass.
as he appeared to have planned his killings years
Look
before
at me.
he
Looks like
carried
a
out his
fucking
actions.
Chester the Molester.
Israel Keys. Israel Keys, a notorious American serial killer, was apprehended in 2012 after a meticulous investigation that connected him to the disappearance and murder of Samantha Koenig, an 18-year-old barista from Anchorage, Alaska.
I thought a serial
However, it
killer
was the
meant
search
more
of
than
Keys's home
one.
following his arrest that revealed a shocking and chilling discovery. Authorities found a carefully organized cache of evidence, including what Keys referred to as his kill kits, or murder caches. These kits were hidden in various locations across the United States, often buried in remote areas. In his home, police uncovered maps, notebooks, and extensive research materials indicating that Keys had methodically planned each of his crimes years in advance. Perhaps most disturbing was the discovery of photographs and personal items from his victims, which Keys had kept as trophies. Keys's home also contained numerous firearms, restraints, and other tools of his deadly trade, further underscoring the level of control he exerted over his victims and his environment. The discovery of these items painted a grim picture of a man who lived a double life, outwardly a dedicated father and businessman, but in reality, a remorseless predator who hunted human beings for sport. With chess, people create beautiful problems, but the next serial killer chose to be the chessboard killer. Alexander Pichushkin. When authorities finally apprehended Alexander Pichushkin, the notorious Russian serial killer known as the
His face
chessboard
looks all
killer, and searched
smashed
his
up on that
apartment,
one
they encountered
side.
a chilling and disturbing scene that underscored the depth of his crimes. The most alarming discovery was a chessboard with many of its squares marked. Pichushkin had reportedly intended to fill each square with a murder, ultimately aiming for 64 victims, one for each square. In addition to the chessboard, police found a variety of objects linked to his murders. There were multiple notebooks filled with morbid writings and drawings detailing his thoughts on murder and the satisfaction he derived from it. Police also uncovered various tools and
I don't think
weapons,
I've heard of
including
him
hammers
before.
and
That might
ropes, which were
actually be
believed to have
something
been
to look
used in his
into.
killings. Another disturbing find was a collection of videotapes. Some of these tapes contained footage of Pichushkin leading his victims to the crime scenes, recording their final moments before their brutal deaths. The investigation also led to the discovery of personal items belonging to some of his victims. These items were kept to remind him of his conquests and the lives he had taken. Drugs are meant to heal and relieve one's pain, but the next serial killer used them to inflict pain. Harold Shipman. On September 7th, 1998, the quiet town of Mottram was about to be shaken to its core. Police officers, acting on suspicions about Harold Shipman, conducted a thorough search of his home at 15 Rowcross Green. Among the many items seized during the search, officers discovered a seemingly innocuous plastic bag. The bag held a large stash of morphine and diamorphine, powerful opioids that Shipman had no legal right to possess.
gave them the
Inside the
good
bag,
shit.
police found 54 morphine tablets out of a batch of 60 kept inside a syrup box with a prescription label. Additionally, there were 39 30-milligram tablets and 4 ampules of diamorphine. These drugs had all been prescribed from the Co-op pharmacy neighboring Shipman's Market Street surgery. The discovery of these drugs was not just a matter of illegal possession, it was a crucial piece of evidence that linked Shipman to the deaths of his patients. Morphine and diamorphine are potent painkillers, often used in end-of-life care. However, in the wrong hands, they can be lethal. But the most shocking aspect of this discovery was the realization that Shipman had written numerous prescriptions for patients who had already died. One such patient was Harold Freeman, who died on February 20th, 1993. 2 days later, a 30-milligram diamorphine ampule was dispensed in his name. Shipman had visited Mr. Freeman the day before his death, but there was no mention of diamorphine in the surgery records of his treatment. Shipman had exploited his position of trust to carry out his heinous crimes, and the discovery of the drugs was a key piece of evidence that ultimately led to his conviction. The next killer uses items at home to create his killing equipment. Albert Fish. Albert Fish's home was a veritable house of horrors, a place where the unimaginable became reality. The first and perhaps most disturbing discovery was a collection of letters and notes that Fish had meticulously written and kept. Each letter was a window into Fish's twisted mind, filled with graphic descriptions of torture, cannibalism, and sadomasochistic acts. One letter, in particular, stood out. It was addressed to the mother of Grace Budd, a 10-year-old girl who had gone missing in 1928. In this letter, Fish described in excruciating detail how he had lured Grace away, murdered her, and then consumed parts of her flesh. As investigators continued their search, they stumbled upon a collection of homemade torture devices. There were whips made from belts, needles, and nails, which he used to inflict pain on his victims and himself. In a small, hidden compartment, investigators found human remains. Bones and fragments of flesh were carefully stored, some of which were later identified as belonging to several of Fish's victims. One of the most bizarre discoveries was Fish's collection of self-inflicted injuries. During a medical examination, it was revealed that Fish had inserted needles into his groin and abdomen. X-rays showed over 20 needles embedded in his body. The investigation also uncovered Fish's extensive history of mental illness. He had been diagnosed with several psychiatric disorders, including schizophrenia and sadomasochism. It was clear that Fish's depravity was deeply rooted in his psyche, a dark and twisted part of his being that no amount of treatment could reach. What was discovered in the home of the next killer reveals he is probably a carnivore. Gary Ridgway.
Ooh,
4 decades
Iowa.
after he terrorized the Seattle region, the last known set of remains linked to the Green River Killer have been identified, completing a long-standing effort to identify each of the 49 women and girls he killed. The remains, known as Bones 20, belong to Everett teenager Tammy Lyles, who was identified as a victim in 1988, the King County Sheriff's Office confirmed Monday. Lyles was 16 when she disappeared from downtown Seattle in June 1983. Several of her bones and some teeth were found in South King County in 2003 after serial killer Gary Ridgway led investigators to the site. Officials also found partial remains in 1985 in Tigard Ore and identified them as Lyles through dental records. Ridgway was convicted of murdering 49 women and teenage girls, including Lyles,
he put in
between
the
the
work.
early 1980s
49.
and late 1990s. He pleaded guilty to the murders of 48 of them in 2003 as part of a plea agreement that spared him the death penalty. He pleaded guilty in 2011 to his 49th murder of a woman he killed nearly 30 years prior. Ridgway, 74, is serving a life sentence at Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla. Ridgway may probably have been infesting on the flesh of his victims, but the next killer was a real butcher of human flesh. Andre Chikatilo.
Yep.
The investigation into Andrei Chikatilo, also known as the Butcher of Rostov,
They had to
revealed
lock him in
several
a
shocking
cage.
and disturbing details.
the
Chikatilo confessed to the murder of 56 people, though he
courtroom.
was ultimately convicted of 52. His victims were often chosen from among the dropouts of society,
See there,
ranging from
put in
young
the work
runaways,
too.
orphans,
56.
prostitutes, alcoholics, to the mentally handicapped. At the railway stations, bus stops, and on the suburban Elektrichka trains of the region, he would entice them with offers of food and drink, then steer them away to parks and forests. The police investigation was named Operation Lesopolosa, Forest Path, where he would rape them and mutilate their bodies. Chikatilo would gouge out their eyes as well, driven by the old superstition that the image of a murderer remained on the retinas of his victims. In 1982, 7 deaths were recorded. In 1984, 13. Soon, bodies were piling up faster than police could identify them, and there was a backlog of paperwork. There was no search warrant issued specifically for Andrei Chikatilo's home during the initial investigations into the murders for which he was eventually convicted. Chikatilo was arrested multiple times before his final arrest in 1990, but the Soviet police did not have sufficient evidence to obtain a search warrant for his home until after his confession. The Soviet criminal justice system at the time did not operate with the same procedural norms regarding search warrants as seen in Western legal systems. Much of the evidence against Chikatilo was gathered through interrogation and forensic analysis after his final arrest. The next serial
It looks
killer appeared
crazy.
to not be remorseful, feeling his crimes were chilling and satisfactory. Edmund Kemper. Edmund Kemper, the co-ed killer, terrorized California in the early 1970s. His horrific acts ended in April 1973, but the gruesome findings in his home still haunt those who investigated
American
the
Horror
case.
Story
On
did a
January 7,
dang segment on him,
1973,
too.
Kemper picked up 18-year-old Cindy Shaw, shot her, and brought her body to his mother's house. There, he dismembered her and buried her head in the garden. in a spot overlooked by his mother's bedroom. Despite neighbors and his mother being close by, no one noticed anything suspicious. Kemper himself later admitted in a 1984 interview that he was getting better at avoiding detection, flaunting his invisibility. He recounted carrying a severed head in a camera bag while passing a smiling couple, highlighting the chilling contrast between his reality and normal life. Days later, Shaw's dismembered remains were found along the coast. Kemper's killing spree continued, claiming more victims, including his mother and her friend, before he turned himself in on April 24, 1973. The horrifying details of his crimes remain unforgettable. The next serial killer's victims were specifically men. Robert Berdella. The investigation into Robert Berdella began on April 2, 1988, when Christopher Bryson escaped Berdella's captivity. Bryson, who had been tortured for days, fled to a neighbor's house, naked with a dog collar around his neck. His testimony led police to Berdella's home at 4315 Charlotte Street, where they uncovered a horrific scene. Police found logs documenting Berdella's crimes, including dates, times, and explicit descriptions of torture. Investigators also discovered human remains.
It's going to be a fun Saturday night.
And bones buried in the backyard. In addition to physical evidence, Polaroid photographs showed the extent of torture Berdella inflicted. His victims were young men, lured with promises of work or shelter, then drugged and tortured. Personal items of victims, kept as mementos, further illustrated Berdella's obsession. Berdella's trial captivated the nation. He pleaded guilty to multiple murders, avoiding the death penalty, but receiving life sentences without parole. Family is meant to be a space for love, but these next serial killers turned their home to a killing zone, beginning with their daughter. Fred and Rosemary West.
Yep.
In 1994, police were led to 25 Cromwell Street in Gloucester while investigating the disappearance of Heather West, the 16-year-old daughter of Fred and Rosemary West, missing since 1987. Her parents' conflicting stories about her whereabouts eventually drew law enforcement's attention. Heather, born on October 17, 1970, was the first child of Fred and Rosemary. She often clashed with her father, and it's believed that her threat to expose his abuse led to her tragic fate. On February 24, 1994, police began digging in the garden of the house and discovered Heather's remains beneath the patio. Further excavation revealed 8 more bodies in varying states of decomposition, some dismembered and buried in shallow graves. The investigation expanded to the cellar, where evidence of the West's sadistic crimes, including torture devices and videotapes, was found. The house was soundproofed to muffle the victims' screams. Fred and Rosemary were arrested for multiple murders. Fred took his own life in prison, while Rosemary was convicted of 10 murders and sentenced to life in prison. The next on the list found a perfect way to take his victim's life, and he did that effortlessly during sexual encounters. Herb Baumeister. The investigation into Herb Baumeister began in 1994, when a man named Tony Harris came forward with a chilling story. Harris, who frequented gay bars in the area, reported that he had been lured to Baumeister's home by a man using the alias Brian Smart. Harris described how Brian Smart had attempted to strangle him during a sexual encounter, but he managed to escape. Despite Harris's testimony, the police initially lacked sufficient evidence to obtain a search warrant. It wasn't until 1996, when Baumeister's wife, Julie, filed for divorce and allowed the police to search the property, that the full extent of his crimes was revealed. On June 24, 1996, police conducted a search of Fox Hollow Farm. Scattered across the property were thousands of pieces of human remains, primarily consisting of crushed and burned skeletal fragments. The sheer number of remains, estimated to be around 10,000 pieces, indicated that Baumeister had been operating for years, leaving a trail of devastation in his wake. The initial discovery of human remains on Baumeister's property sent shockwaves through the community and the nation. Forensic experts were brought in to examine the remains and identify the victims. The condition of the remains suggested that Baumeister had gone to great lengths to conceal his crimes, burning and crushing the bones to make identification difficult. As the investigation continued, more details about Baumeister's double life emerged. He had been using the alias Brian Smart to frequent gay bars in central Indiana, luring his victims with promises of fun and companionship. Once at his home, Baumeister would strangle his victims during sexual encounters, disposing of their remains on his property. The discovery of 10,000 pieces of human remains was a testament to the scale of his atrocities. If you enjoyed watching,
I knew about most of those, but you know.
I knew about most of them, just not that Herb, the last one.
Yeah, that's a name that never came up to me before. That's weird.
So we might have to do an episode on him, like, because I looked him up and he looks like the average business Wall Street broker guy.
Oh, Wall Street broker guys have their own secrets, you know.
Exactly. Okay, guys. Well, that does it for this episode of The Asylum with Harley and Joker. Tune in next week. Not sure what we're talking about yet, but we will figure it out before then. Well, we'll see you next time. Bye.
Go get your own pod tonight, motherfuckers.